consideration of presentation from Nielsen Merksamer on the 2025 legislative session and potential areas of emphasis for 2026. All right.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here today. Jeff Neal, representing Nielsen Merksamer, representing the county in Sacramento. We've been working with the county for a couple of years now, and here today to present on what happened this year, some of the,
Yeah, you can sit up here if you like.
I'll just stand here. I like to pace around actually when I walk, so I can't, just this mic comes.
After my own heart.
I'm a little more comfortable standing, but thank you. Just here to talk about the legislative session, the budget that was passed, the mini budget bills that were part of the budget that passed, some items of significance for Lake County in particular, and then talk a little bit about what we see coming next year in 2026, because there's a lot of unfinished business and a lot of known unknowns, as we like to say. So, first of all, the state passed a balanced budget, as is constitutionally required. There were a number of cuts and deferrals. None, I think that, a lot of this was reported in the summer. I think where a lot of the interest came in at the end of session, they already had a lot of things to handle. And then, of course, the Governor Newsom decided to make the redistricting an item of urgency. And so there was, when the legislature comes back from summer recess, they have 4 weeks. And that's a real quick 4 weeks because there's a lot to do. All the bills essentially still have to be passed. They always update the budget, like you guys do your quarterly updates. They kind of do an end of session budget update. And then all of the bills still have to pass. Well, the Prop 50 discussion took an entire week where that was the only thing that was really talked about. But on top of that, there were all the things that the legislature already knew they had to try and get done. This was cap and trade reauthorization, allocating funds from the Proposition 4 resources bond that was passed last year by voters, and a couple other items that we'll get into. Both of those, the cap and trade, now cap and invest reauthorization, and Prop 4, as well as the other items, it looked to all of us like that was not going to happen. For cap and trade reauthorization, not the biggest deal. They still have a couple of years before that program expires and they needed to reauthorize it. But on the Prop 4 allocation, it would have been a major misstep. I think a lot of us were considering. There's $10 billion that have been approved by voters. The only cost to the state are the annual interest payments, which have been built into the budget at this point. $10 billion that they can allocate over a number of years, mostly for water projects, also some for not just drinking water, but also natural resource water, flood control, extreme heat, a lot of parks money in there, a lot of fire mitigation and response money. So to have $10 billion available and then to allocate none of it would have been sort of shocking, actually. At the last minute, really past the last minute, they waited until they were a day late, actually, getting all these deals together. But in fact, all of them ended up coming together at the, like I said, just past the last minute, with one exception that we expect to see some activity on next year. They did actually end up allocating over a third of Proposition 4 from all of the categories of funding. They did end up reauthorizing cap and trade, now called cap and invest. What's in a name? And along with that, they reauthorized and slightly modified the greenhouse gas reduction fund. So the cap and invest program, there's the, capping the emissions and requiring industry to buy enough credits to cover their emissions. That's where the revenue comes from. They have quarterly auctions where they buy those credits. beyond the ones that they're just given. And then the greenhouse gas reduction fund is the invest part of it. So that's where they cap the emissions and then they invest the proceeds. And a lot of this funding goes to a number of programs that are of interest to counties. It is where the money for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program comes from. It gets about, depending on auction revenues, about $800 million a year for planning various types of development, including transit-oriented development. There's some transit money that comes from that. There's some clean air monitoring funding that comes from that. So all of those did come together. They did get passed. Because they were just past the last minute, they actually had to suspend the rules of the House, and they went one day longer than they were supposed to, which all of us who work in the Capitol were very pleased about, very happy to come in on a Saturday when we thought we were going to be all done on Friday. And because of that, actually, the governor had an extra day to sign and veto all the bills because he gets 30 days from whenever their last day of session is. So we got an extra day for all of those things. And so in the middle of all that, of course, there was also the transition from the not as of Monday, as of yesterday, no longer the current pro tem, Senator McGuire, but they announced the transition date, which was yesterday, for the new Senate President pro tem, Senator Monique Limon from the Santa Barbara area. So that transition did happen officially as of yesterday. We expect that to result in some changes to the committee assignments, committee chairs, including the important ones, the Budget Committee and the Appropriations Committee, as well as her leadership team. So we'll be in communication with your staff as that happens. But it'll be really of interest because you get to see where all of the most influential posts are divvied up, both geographically, urban versus rural, north versus south. And the list of folks that has been talked about a lot includes a lot of fairly moderate Democrats in her leadership team. We don't know if that's actually the case or if she's settled on that until the announcement comes out, though. So we'll see what happens there. So on the we have we've gone through in our office and compiled all of the Prop 4 allocations that the legislature made in the budget bill. We're sending that to staff, and they're sort of tagged with whether or not those will be more likely to be, based on the way it's budgeted, sort of open grant programs, or whether they're really just allocated to a specific project in one part of the state. One example of that is really that's in two parts of the state, the offshore wind facilities. There's some money for that in the bond. That's not going to happen in an inland area, I'll tell you that. The offshore wind is definitely going to happen off of the Humboldt coast and off of Long Beach, most likely. So, ones like those, not tagged, but a lot of money for water projects, a lot of money for certain types of transportation projects, a lot for park projects, whether that's wilderness nature parks that people can go to, or whether they're city parks. So as the state departments and agencies that are responsible for those funds prepare those opportunities, hopefully getting the list to county staff ahead of time will allow them to get some lead time on seeing which projects might be appropriate for those funding opportunities. One of the aspects of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that I wanted to bring up, they did alter sort of the priority of funding a little bit. And so they didn't change. There was a lot of talk about how much they would change where the money goes. And mostly they didn't change that for now, although they did build in sort of a review process in the out years to look at how whether the allocation of funds is meeting the climate goals of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund program, which is unsurprisingly to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But they kept for now mostly the allocation. So there will be $1 billion that goes to the high-speed rail, down from roughly $1.25 billion. There will be $1 billion that goes through the annual budget process, that the governor and the legislature can negotiate for every year to deal with whatever high priority items have come up that year. The SRA fee, you guys remember that from several years ago. That is now, that's been suspended for many years. That funding is getting backfilled from GGRF. That's been true for a while, as well as the advanced transportation and alternative energy manufacturing tax credit that gets paid for out of GGRF. But then there are all of the continuously appropriated programs where the money just goes out. The legislature doesn't have to do it every year. That includes the one I mentioned earlier, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Fund that gets approximately $800 million. It includes some transit programs that get a few $100 million. A newish one called that has to do with monitoring clean air at the community level. And then the Safer Drinking Water Program, which provides drinking water to very small water systems, usually that just a couple of houses are on, where the wells are found to be undrinkable or often even can't be used for non-potable purposes. So the Safer Drinking Water Program provides drinking water to and helps clean up those wells. All of that funding used to be funded at a certain percent of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, where they were, if they didn't get their full allocation, they at least got something very close to it. These revenues swing from year to year from $3 to $3.5 billion. Usually they're around 4 to 4.5, and then once they got as high as $5 billion. Well, at this point, with the way they've structured it, if the revenues come in below $4.25 billion, which they do about a third of the time, those continuously appropriated programs, including the Affordable Housing, Sustainable Communities, Safer Drinking Water, that's where the hit comes from. So the hit is not shared. The insufficient revenue is not shared equally among all the funds. It really goes there first. For any county programs that rely on those funds, should be aware that the funding is a little more volatile at this point. Of course, the hope is that the auction revenues remain healthy now that the program has been reauthorized. People know it's going to be around for the next 15 or 20 years. One of the other major issues for the legislature this year was dealing with AI, automated decision systems, putting some safety guardrails around those. A number of them had to do with the government use of AI and automatic decision systems in particular. These were heavily contested bills. There were many amendments made over the course of the year. And then right at the end of session, almost every single one of them failed to get the votes to get off of either the Senate floor or the Assembly floor. I think this is a bit surprising to people. I'd say one of the overall takeaways from this year in particular was that the moderate Democrats have become a much more forceful caucus to deal with. The last couple of years, they had not been very successful at stopping some of the more progressive elements of their party from passing the priorities that they wanted. This year, the moderate Democrats, partly because of the election in November that changed the makeup of the legislature, and partly, people just reacting to the way the last November election went, they were extremely effective. And so I think one of the things to look for in 2026 is whether that continues to be true or whether this was sort of the high point for the moderate Democratic caucus and their influence ebbs again. But on these AI and ADS bills, that was one area where they were extremely effective. Because there was a lot of hesitance around about how broad some of these bills were. So some of them, would have, until amendments that came in just the last few days of session as an attempt to try and get it to pass. One of the bills, AB 1018, would have stopped public agencies and many private entities from, while it was aiming at AI, it included technologies that everybody has used for years. By my reading of the bill, it would have prevented Excel spreadsheets that project forward into future years. Wouldn't have prevented, would have required significant disclosure that would have been very expensive to comply with. Also, bills having to do with using AI or automated decision systems to inform decisions around employment, either both hiring but also retention or evaluation of workers. That was the one bill that did pass, but the governor vetoed it. So really it was sort of a clean sweep for the opponents on all of those bills. The governor, of course, been very open to arguments from the tech industry, and these were some of their big bills this year. There are a number of bills related to fire insurance. I know a big issue for most parts of the state, definitely here in Lake County. I would say it was a mixed bag. AB1 passed. That was one that the county was particularly interested in. Several others got watered down and then passed, having to do with either the state fire marshal influence or how insurers deal with properties after a fire, if they can cancel them right away, or if they there's a 1 year no cancellation. That's now extended to commercial properties as well, not just residential properties. So that was another one. I think that is one of those issues that we will continue to see. Not all has been said that can. So we'll continue to see bills about property safety, about the insurance market, about when insurers can drop policies, when they must insure policies. Obviously, we have the regulations, the new regulatory status at the Department of Insurance as well that continues to be controversial. We'll continue to see bills on housing sufficiency and affordability. A new wrinkle was thrown into that this last week when the federal government's NOFO came out for a lot of these funds that now require, and homelessness is part of this, that require more of the federal money to be spent on temporary shelters, and only a maximum of 30% of certain grant funds can be spent on permanent housing, which is where, frankly, a lot of California cities and counties have been using that money for long-term solutions to homelessness instead of just temporary shelter. That combined with the Proposition 1 funds for behavioral health, these are all, as well as the HAP funding, which has been sort of delayed. All of these are causing counties and cities to a certain extent to reevaluate the mix of their programs and how they can continue to fund the programs that are keeping people sheltered in the short term and the long term. And then water infrastructure will continue to be an issue as well. I think the last thing is just the state budget. It is looking surprisingly good right now, but I think is considered still pretty precarious. So the revenues have come in so far this fiscal year several $billion higher than estimates. Most of that money has to go to K through community college education, at least half of it. Another good part will have to go in the state's rainy day fund, which they did use a little bit of this year. So help start building that back up. But right now the state budget's looking quite good. A number of people are predicting the AI stocks to, the word bubble is used a lot. Nobody really knows, but if those stocks right now and the income coming to the people who hold those stocks, many of whom are in the Bay Area, if those stocks start to tumble, the state revenue will immediately look a lot less rosy. So that'll be a major thing going into this coming year, especially as the state legislators start trying to deal with the effects of H.R. 1 and the many health and human service program cuts that will be coming, not just this year, more of them 1 or 2 years out, and a lot of increases to the administration of those programs, new requirements, new work requirements that the county will have to keep track of for a lot of the people who get Medi-Cal, who get CalFresh benefits. So I think that will be the major budget item, is how the state will respond to that, and how many of those costs, the new costs of administration, but also the cost to try and backfill a lot of those services that the federal government is pulling back from funding, how much of that the state can afford to do, and how much of that cost they will push down to counties. That'll be an area where we are extremely active, I think not just this coming year, but for the next couple of years. So that was, I think, in a, I don't know if it was a nutshell or 2 or 3 or 4 nutshells, but that was a lot of what happened this year. Happy to answer any specific questions that any of you have.
Go ahead, Supervisor
Yeah,
President.
thanks for that, Jeff. Do you want to touch on the proposed increases to the FAIR Plan and what that looks like? Particularly, we have some of the higher zip codes in District 5 and District 3 have the highest
Yeah, and a lot of these are, both the result of the LA fires, of course, where it wasn't just a lot of properties, but a lot of extremely high value properties, Malibu and in the Pasadena area. I mentioned AB1. There was also the effort to allow the FAIR plan to use the iBank to kind of raise funding in order to avoid liquidation, I guess, or funding insufficiency. It's also related, as you know, Supervisor Pyska, to the new regulations that allow the catastrophic modeling that will increase prices, but require, hopefully, if it works as planned, the insurers that use the catastrophic modeling to insure more homeowners in higher fire risk areas of the state. I think this was when they were rolling out, when the commissioner and the governor, to a certain extent, were rolling out a lot of these proposals. One of the phrases that did not pass their lips very often, if ever, was affordability. Right? They're talking about making sure insurers try to get them to stay in the state or come back to the state. They're talking about helping make sure people get insurance. But I think there was recognition on their part that it was going to be difficult at best to pair that with keeping rates affordable. And so I think that's what we're seeing is a lot of those costs, not just of the disasters that have already occurred, but now of the ones being projected in the future, being priced into the cost of insurance.
So what do you think the likelihood of these increases going through is?
If I could use the AI or the predictive modeling of the automated decision systems, I think it'll be difficult to avoid. And so I think the size of them is a question, or how broadly they can be spread, right, among all of California's insured. If they're more localized, then they're higher. If they're spread among more policyholders, right, the increases can be lower because they'll be helped by properties in less fire-prone areas. So that might be part of the conversation, but I think that's been, from the conversations that I've heard and been a part of, that's sort of been the toughest part of the puzzle to crack, is how to try and keep those costs affordable. And I mean, it seems like that has not been the highest priority for the decision makers in Sacramento.
Yeah. So, and just so you know, you probably have looked at it, but in our zip codes in the county, it's between mid 30% to mid 40% increase.
Yeah. Well, if we can work with you to reach out to the department, if we can help facilitate some conversations with them, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, and we're happy to provide any type of case study or story or anything to illustrate that hardship that is going to hit our residents, which they're already having difficulty making the premiums that they have now. So each year we're seeing a 40% increase on Fair Plan, and then this is going to be a significant increase on those that are already on.
Yeah, we have family that live in Tuolumne County, and they've had the same complaint. Just really shocked at how much their costs have gone up in just the last year or two.
Supervisors, about to.
Yeah, my questions or my comments are not necessarily about what happened, but just what we're doing to position ourselves. The Hospital Health Transformation Program from HR 1 provided something like $50 billion, I think, over the next 10 years, 5 years. We're getting $100 million a year in the state of California because every state gets the same amount. When you divide that, that's about 1.7 million, but we know we're not going to get an equal share. We're going to get our equitable share, which is going to be much less. We've already had some cancellations of some pretty major projects here from our healthcare providers, and they're also, every single one, including the surrounding counties, are on the list of potential failing because of the changes through HR 1. What is the state doing to make sure, because I'm worried their application might be denied. You just don't know. But is there any conversation happening in the background of what else can be done to help support rural hospitals? Because that's what it was all about, was to help support rural hospitals and the impact it would have.
That's definitely been something that's been coming up. And of course, there was the hospital closure, a couple of counties south of here, just recently because of they found a route that made it, just under the distance required. The rural hospital issue has come up. I think, we will need to do a lot of work to keep it higher on the priority list because the number of health issues got very, very long very quickly. The MCO tax, the Managed Care Organization tax that we just sort of passed a change to last November, the voters in Prop 35, that is now essentially no longer allowed the way ours is structured under federal law. Things like that, things like the same dollar amount per state, clearly things that seem designed to target California in particular. The way the error rate for, not to go off topic, but the way the error rate for human services was designed, it was specifically targeted at California. The punishment or the penalties go up until you get right to where California is, and then right after us, they decline again, right, for states with different error rates. So we have the end of the MCO tax, which is several $1 billion a year. We have the change to the premiums. We have a number of people becoming ineligible for Medi-Cal, different communities. All of those will be fighting along with the rural hospital issue for funding. I think the received wisdom, I think is understood by everybody. There isn't enough money available in the state budget or that could be freed up to backfill all of those. So, where the governor and the legislature prioritize those issues will be important. And that's why I think while it is definitely one of the items on the list of things that are of great concern, it is something that we'll need to put a lot of energy into making sure it's high enough on the list that it gets the funding it needs.
Thank you.
All right. There's not anything else that I opened up to the public already? Nope, I'll open it up for public comment. All right, I'll close public comment. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Supervisor.
And, we'll see where we go from here.
And hopefully I'll see some of you in a couple of weeks down in Santa Clara County.
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
See you then.
Thank you.
All right.